In order to truly understand the aphorisms of Friedrich Nietzsche, some of the greatest of the Western canon, we must remember Freud's remark on Nietzsche as a thinker and person. Nietzsche knew himself better than anyone who had ever lived or was ever likely to live. Knowledge of oneself is the fastest way to an extraordinary life. That is why Nietzsche argued that gaining knowledge, broadening knowledge, all comes from courage, discipline, and honesty with oneself. If we wish to live a life that is truly special, first, we must stop believing in the commonsensical notion that there is someone or something out there that can show us the way to a better life. Finding such help, even if it were to actually help us, cannot allow us to enjoy the privilege of an extraordinary life. Rather, it will only strengthen our belief in the savior or a miracle. It is in his Ecce Homo where we find Nietzsche's detailed descriptions of how he himself had come to attain a life of extraordinary heights. It is a book that attests to his immense pride and integrity as he reveals his life as clearly as possible without any excuse for the shortcomings or failures. The title of the book, Ecce Homo, comes from the words of Pontius Pilate, who presented Jesus Christ to the crowd and yelled, "Ecce Homo, behold the man." By putting himself in the place of Christ, Nietzsche was placing himself on the same pedestal as the Christ on the cross. It is also his challenge to all of us to do the same. It is his declaration that, since he had done it, we can all do it too. We must remember the fact that the subtitle of Thus Spoke Zarathustra is a book for everyone and no one. It is only the person who has achieved the complete ownership of his own life and reject the notion of a savior, either in the form of a sage or saint, that can crown oneself as a truly privileged being. Becoming an indispensable being in the universe while distinguishing yourself from everyone else is a formidable task. The only person who knows how you will achieve such absolute autonomy for yourself is yourself. So, in order to find your own way to greatness, first we must realize our own limits. It is the act of establishing the ceiling of our own being, the full potential of ourselves. Knowing one's limits requires thorough investigation of oneself, which in turn requires a considerable depth of knowledge. In fact, such knowledge allows us to create ourselves. When one comes to know oneself, he or she in fact has created a new ego. In Ecce Homo, Nietzsche gives us the standard characteristics of a person who is capable of an extraordinary life. Such traits are wisdom, cleverness, and creativity. We'll take a look at these three characteristics one by one. First is the wisdom. Nietzsche prided himself on his wisdom to discern the small rise and fall of these abilities as a thinker. He claimed that it was something that he had gained through years of struggle with his illness. This was the reason why he could become the wisest person he knew. He was able to assess the value of health from the perspective of the patient. His major works have all been completed when he was in the state of acute illness. When the pain of the body was enticing him to give up, he responded by raising himself through spirit. Nietzsche identified this as the instinct for rehabilitation. He was truly wise. He knew what it took to finish his life's work. A lesser man would have seen illness as an excuse for failure, but Nietzsche, who proclaimed himself to be the wisest of them all, turned illness into a grist to his creative mill. For him, being ill was a chance for him to attain true health. Second, it is the ability to make oneself clever out of one's own volition. Nietzsche claimed that, in order to become clever, one must watch out for wasting one's life. It is to refrain from spending needless energy on questions that do not matter at all. Anguish is the price of existence, but also an expensive habit that we cannot afford. That is why Nietzsche claims that I do not waste myself. To worry about failures and not being able to stop second-guessing oneself is a trait that dull and ignorant people share. A clever person would do away with pointless questions quickly and would not let needless anguish distract him. The third characteristic is the ability to create. What allowed Nietzsche to write his books was his ability to stay undistracted from the concerns of his day and focus his energy on problems of the future. He claimed that some people are born only after their death. Nietzsche argued that experiencing his writings is to experience rising to the absolute limits of a human being. What is written in blood conveys the passions of the blood. It allows us to experience the heightened enthusiasm of an invigorated spirit. In order to wield the speed and spirit of the writing of the highest caliber, one needs soft fingers and a courageous fist. Nietzsche, who studied classic, had claimed that of all humanity, he was the only person who had possessed both. While most writers would focus on things that would interest people of his own time, Nietzsche, being the man of the future, an untimely philosopher, was able to stay on his course to produce the greatest works of human history. In summary, in order to crown oneself as a privileged being and to give oneself the special status that follows, one needs wisdom that knows how to use pain of existence as a fuel for creation, cleverness to evade wasteful anguish, and finally, the ability to create towards the future rather than the present, to give up the desire to rely on others, to trust one's own potential, and to reach for the limits of one's own being. We can all accomplish this. With the absolute conviction that proclaims, "No one can live my life," we hope you will be able to answer Nietzsche's call to present yourself to the world and exclaim, Ecce Homo. It is Nietzsche who said that philosophy, as I have understood and lived it, is a volunteer living in ice and high mountains. The road to greatness has never been an easy one, but Nietzsche was never deterred and never forgot to demand us of the same courageousness. Until next time, bye. Paper Renaissance.